What if a simple morning jog turned into a life-changing moment? John Cena and Dwayne Johnson thought it was just another routine run until they saw her, a little girl, silent, scared, and sending a hidden signal for help. Something wasn't right. And when they decided to follow their instincts, they uncovered a truth darker than they could have imagined. Would you have noticed the sign? Stay with us until the end to find out what happened next. Like the video, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss more powerful stories like this. The morning air was crisp as John Cena and Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson jogged through the park, their heavy footsteps echoing on the paved pathway. The park was alive with early risers, joggers, dog walkers, and families enjoying the fresh air. The two men had made a habit of these morning runs, finding solace in the rhythm of movement and friendly competition. "You're slowing down, brother," Dwayne teased, shooting a sideways grin at John. John smirked, wiping a bead of sweat from his brow. "I'm letting you have your moment. Wouldn't want to bruise your ego this early in the morning." Dwayne chuckled, shaking his head as they picked up the pace, their powerful strides carrying them forward. The morning sun cast long shadows across the pathway, dappling the ground with golden light filtering through the trees. Everything seemed normal, peaceful, until John saw her. A small black girl, no older than 9 or 10, sat stiffly on a park bench near the path. She wore a light yellow dress and had neatly braided hair, but there was something deeply unsettling about the way she sat, too still, too rigid, as if she was afraid to move. Beside her sat a large man in a dark coat and sunglasses, his face partially hidden behind an open newspaper. His posture was relaxed, casual even, but something about him sent a prickle of unease down John's spine. It wasn't just the contrast between the girl's obvious tension and his indifference. It was something more. John's eyes met the girl's. She didn't blink, didn't react. She just stared back, wide-eyed, as if she had been waiting for someone to notice her. Her lips were slightly parted, but no words came. And then she did something that made John's breath catch. She curled her thumb into her palm and folded her fingers over it, making a small, almost imperceptible fist. John's stomach dropped. It was a signal. A silent cry for help. He had seen it before, in awareness campaigns, in interviews with police officers who specialized in rescuing kidnapped children. A small gesture that, to most, would go unnoticed. But not to him. John's pace slowed as the realization hit him, his mind racing. He turned his head slightly, catching Dwayne's attention. "You see that?" he muttered under his breath. Dwayne followed his gaze, frowning. "See what?" "The girl. She just made a signal." Dwayne's expression darkened as he looked back at the child. Her small hands were folded in her lap now, still and unmoving, but the fear in her eyes remained. John's instincts screamed at him. Something wasn't right. As they passed the bench, the man suddenly shifted, folding his newspaper with deliberate care. He stood up, grabbing the girl's wrist in a way that was firm but not forceful enough to draw attention. She barely resisted, only the slightest hesitation before she allowed herself to be pulled up. John and Dwayne stopped a few feet ahead, exchanging glances. "That's not normal," John said. "No," Dwayne agreed. "It's not." They turned just in time to see the man leading the girl away, his large frame nearly blocking her from view. John clenched his jaw. "We need to follow them." Dwayne nodded, his muscles tensing. "Let's go." They took off after them, careful not to be obvious. The man walked with purpose, his grip on the girl unyielding. She remained eerily silent, her movements mechanical, like a doll being led by an invisible string. As they tailed the pair from a safe distance, John felt his pulse quicken. The girl hadn't made a sound. She hadn't screamed or fought back. Because she was terrified. And that terrified him. John and Dwayne kept their distance, blending into the crowd as they followed the man and the girl toward the bus stop. The man moved quickly, his large frame blocking most of the girl's body from view. John clenched his jaw as he watched the way the girl's feet barely kept up with his strides. She wasn't being dragged, but there was no doubt she was being controlled. Every few steps, the man would glance around, checking his surroundings, his grip on the girl's wrist never loosening. John kept his tone casual, but his words were tense. He's in a hurry. Dwayne nodded, his gaze sharp. And she's not talking. Not even looking around. Something's off. The man reached the bus stop and came to a sudden halt, his grip on the girl tightening as he scanned the passing vehicles. The bus rolled up moments later, its doors hissing open. Without hesitation, he pushed the girl inside first, his large hand pressing firmly on her shoulder as he guided her into a seat near the back. John and Dwayne exchanged a glance. "We're getting on that bus," John muttered. Dwayne nodded. No sudden moves. They boarded quietly, each dropping a few bills into the fare box before moving toward the middle of the vehicle. The bus was half full, with scattered passengers absorbed in their own worlds, an older woman scrolling through her phone, a man in a construction uniform staring blankly out the window, a teenager with headphones bobbing his head to music only he could hear. The man and the girl were at the very back. John and Dwayne took separate seats, positioning themselves at angles that allowed them to watch without being obvious. The girl sat pressed against the window, her posture stiff. Her hands were in her lap, fingers curled together, as if she were trying to shrink herself down. She didn't fidget, didn't move. She just sat completely still, staring blankly at the seat in front of her. The man sat beside her, one arm draped over the back of the seat, but his posture wasn't relaxed. He was guarding her. John studied him carefully. The sunglasses were still on, but up close, John could see the sharpness in his movements, the way his head turned slightly every few seconds to check for threats, the way his fingers tapped against his knee in an impatient rhythm. This wasn't a father taking his daughter home. This was a man on high alert. Dwayne, sitting a few seats ahead, adjusted his position and casually stretched his arms. His voice was just loud enough for John to hear. "I'm going to test something." He stood up, making his way toward the back of the bus. When he reached the row behind the man and the girl, he pretended to look for a seat, then smiled down at her. "Hey there, kiddo," he said in his usual friendly tone. "That's a nice dress. Yellow is a great color." The girl barely reacted. For half a second, her fingers twitched against her lap. Then the man's grip on her wrist tightened, subtle but unmistakable. "She's shy," the man said, his voice calm but firm. "Doesn't talk much. Doesn't like strangers." Dwayne nodded slowly, his eyes flicking between them. "Right. Long day?" The man didn't miss a beat. "Visiting family. She's tired." John watched from his seat as the girl lowered her chin slightly, her breathing controlled, her shoulders rising and falling in deliberate, measured motions, like she was trying not to cry. His gut twisted. He had seen enough. When the bus lurched to a stop, the man grabbed the girl's arm and hauled her up before the doors had even fully opened. Dwayne turned slightly, his gaze meeting John's. "They're getting off." John nodded, already moving. "So are we." They followed as the man led the girl onto the street. The sun was dipping lower in the sky now, casting long shadows across the pavement. They were in a quieter part of town, the streets lined with small businesses, a few parked cars, and narrow alleys leading away from the main road. The man didn't hesitate. He turned into one of those alleys. John's chest tightened. He's trying to disappear. Dwayne took a breath, rolling his shoulders. Then we better not lose them. They picked up their pace, their eyes locked on the pair ahead. The deeper they went into the alley, the darker it became. Then, without warning, the man stopped, turned, and for the first time, he faced them directly. John and Dwayne came to a slow stop as the man turned to face them. His sunglasses were still on, but the way his jaw clenched, the slight tilt of his head, he knew. He knew they had been following him. The girl stood beside him, her small frame rigid, her hands trembling slightly at her sides. The alley was narrow, dimly lit by a flickering street lamp further down, the sounds of the city fading behind them. John took a step forward, keeping his voice even. "Hey, man. Just wanted to check, everything okay here?" The man didn't move for a moment, as if calculating. Then he scoffed, shaking his head. "What's it to you? We're just trying to get home. You following people for fun?" Dwayne crossed his arms, his presence looming. "Didn't seem like she wanted to go with you back there." The man let out a short, forced laugh. She's shy. Doesn't talk much. Doesn't like strangers. John's gaze flicked to the girl. That right, sweetheart? The girl's lips pressed together. She looked like she wanted to speak, wanted to say something, but the fear in her eyes kept her silent. The man exhaled sharply. Look, we don't need any trouble. We've got places to be. He pulled on the girl's arm again. Come on. John stepped in his path. Hold up. The man's hand twitched, his patience thinning. Move. John didn't move. Just one question. He crouched down slightly, leveling his gaze with the girl's, his voice softened. Hey. You can tell me the truth. Is he really your uncle? The girl blinked. Her shoulders started to tremble. And then, her voice barely above a whisper, she said, No. Dwayne tensed. John felt his stomach drop. The man cursed under his breath. Before anyone could react, he yanked the girl behind him and tried to push past them. John grabbed his arm. Not happening. The man twisted, trying to break free, his calm facade cracking. Let me go. Dwayne's voice was low, dangerous. She said no. The girl whimpered, her eyes darting between them. She took a small step away from the man, as if finally realizing these two strangers weren't here to hurt her. The man's breathing grew heavier, his free hand clenched into a fist. He was cornered. He knew it. And he was getting desperate. Then, from the shadows, came another voice. Problem, boss? John turned his head slightly, his senses on high alert. Two more men stepped out of the darkness, both of them big, their expressions cold. Dwayne sighed. Oh, great. A third figure emerged, this one bulkier, his arms crossed over his chest. You boys look lost. John barely spared them a glance. His focus was still on the man gripping the girl. You really want to do this? The man smirked. I don't think you get it. You should walk away. Dwayne let out a short chuckle, shaking his head. That's not going to happen. The biggest of the new arrivals took a slow step forward. Then you're making a mistake. John's muscles coiled. He had seen this before, the shift in stance, the way the men positioned themselves, cutting off exits. This wasn't just a guy in the park with a girl. This was organized. The realization sent a chill down his spine. The man holding the girl gave one last tug on her arm. You had your chance. John moved first. He grabbed the man's wrist and twisted, prying his grip off the girl. She let out a small gasp as she stumbled back. Dwayne was already reaching for her, pulling her safely behind him. Then everything erupted at once. The moment John wrenched the man's grip off the girl, everything exploded into motion. The biggest of the new arrivals lunged first, aiming a wild punch at Dwayne, but he was ready. He sidestepped effortlessly, his massive arm shooting out to catch the man's wrist mid-swing before twisting it in one powerful motion. A sharp crack filled the alley as the man let out a pained grunt, stumbling backward. John barely had time to register the move before another attacker came at him. This one was fast, a wiry figure who moved with precision, swinging a knife in a quick arc. John dodged the first swipe, then caught the attacker's wrist with both hands and twisted hard. The knife clattered to the ground, and John drove his elbow into the man's ribs, sending him crumpling to his knees. The original man, the one who had been with the girl, took the distraction as an opportunity. He reached for her again, his fingers stretching toward her wrist, but she recoiled, fear flashing across her face. Before he could get any closer, Dwayne's massive frame blocked his path. Dwayne's voice was low, edged with fury. Touch her again, and you won't walk out of here. The man hesitated, his composure cracking for the first time. But another of his men rushed forward, brandishing a gun. John saw the glint of the weapon a second before it was raised. His body reacted before his mind could process. He lunged forward, grabbing the attacker's wrist and shoving it skyward just as the gun went off. The shot rang out through the alley, shattering the eerie quiet of the street, but the bullet buried itself harmlessly into the brick wall above. Dwayne took advantage of the distraction, throwing a brutal right hook that connected with the gunman's jaw. The man's head snapped to the side as he crumpled to the ground, the gun slipping from his grasp. John kicked it away, sending it skidding across the pavement. Two men still stood, shifting uneasily, realizing the situation was turning against them. The biggest one, the same guy who had thrown the first punch, recovered and lunged at Dwayne again. This time, Dwayne planted his feet and caught him mid-charge, lifting him clear off the ground with a guttural roar. He slammed the man down hard onto the pavement, the impact knocking the wind out of him. John turned to the last standing man, the one who had taken the girl. The man's chest rose and fell rapidly, his face pale. He knew he was outmatched. John wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, his gaze locked on him. "You're done." The man swallowed hard. For a second, it looked like he might make a run for it, but before he could move, sirens filled the air, flashing red and blue lights appearing at the alley's entrance. John exhaled slowly. Finally. Several officers spilled into the alley, guns drawn, shouting commands. Dwayne raised his hands in a show of cooperation, stepping away from the fallen men. John did the same. The girl, still trembling, took a step closer to John, gripping the fabric of his sleeve. The officers swiftly cuffed the attackers, forcing them onto their knees. One of the detectives stepped forward, eyeing John and Dwayne with curiosity before turning his attention to the girl. His voice softened. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head but didn't speak. John crouched beside her, his voice gentle. "You're safe now." The girl burst into silent tears, nodding as her body trembled. Dwayne exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. "Took you guys long enough." One of the officers shot him a look. "We got reports of suspicious activity near the bus stop, then a gunshot. You want to tell me what the hell happened here?" John stood, glancing at the now cuffed man who had tried to take the girl. "That guy took her from the park. She signaled for help. We followed them, and when we confronted him, his backup showed up." The detective's gaze flicked toward the man, his expression darkening. "We've had eyes on this guy for months. You just helped us shut down something much bigger than one kidnapping." Dwayne exchanged a glance with John. This wasn't just a random abduction. It was part of something larger. The detective sighed, pulling out his radio. "We're going to need backup. This just turned into something else entirely." John looked down at the girl again, her small hand still gripping his sleeve. He gave her a reassuring smile. "You're going home, kid." She sniffled, her voice small but firm. "Thank you." John nodded. "Always." As the officers began escorting the criminals away, John and Dwayne stepped aside, letting the professionals do their job. The night air was cooler now, the earlier tension easing. Dwayne let out a breath. "Well, that escalated." John let out a short laugh. "You could say that." They stood in silence for a moment, watching as the girl was carefully guided toward a waiting police car. She turned back once, giving them one last look. This time, her eyes weren't filled with fear. John and Dwayne watched as the police loaded the last of the cuffed men into the squad cars. The alley was now filled with the glow of flashing red and blue lights, casting eerie shadows on the surrounding walls. Officers moved swiftly, securing the area, questioning witnesses, and logging evidence. The girl stood near one of the cars, wrapped in a blanket a female officer had given her. She was still trembling slightly, but at least now she was surrounded by people who were there to help. A detective approached them, his sharp eyes flicking between John and Dwayne. "I don't know how the hell you two got mixed up in this, but I think you just helped us take down a major operation." He held up a confiscated phone, the screen still illuminated. "This guy," he gestured toward the man who had been holding the girl, "was part of something bigger. We've been tracking missing children cases that link back to a network. The way you described how he took her, that matches the pattern." John's fists clenched at his sides. So this wasn't just a random abduction. The detective shook his head. "No. These guys weren't working alone. And the way they reacted to you two tells me they were expecting backup that never came." He sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. "Damn lucky we got here when we did." Dwayne crossed his arms. "Luck had nothing to do with it. That girl signaled for help, and we listened. The detective gave him a knowing look. Most people wouldn't have noticed. Or they would have noticed, and done nothing. John glanced toward the girl. She was still quiet, hugging the blanket tightly around herself. He stepped toward her slowly, careful not to overwhelm her. "Hey, kid," he said gently. "You doing okay?" She hesitated before nodding. "I think so." Her voice was small, barely above a whisper. John crouched down to meet her at eye level. "They're going to take care of you now. Make sure you get back to your family." Tears welled up in her eyes. "I don't know if they're looking for me." John's chest tightened. He exchanged a glance with the detective, who sighed. "We'll find out. We have resources for this. She'll be safe." Dwayne stepped forward, his voice firm but kind. "You're not alone, kid. Not anymore." She sniffled, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. Then, after a long pause, she reached out and took John's hand. "Thank you," she whispered. John gave her fingers a reassuring squeeze. "Anytime." The detective cleared his throat. "We need to get her checked in, start processing these guys. But you too," he smirked slightly, "you should probably go home before we rope you into more paperwork." Dwayne exhaled, shaking his head. "Fine by me." John stood up, his gaze lingering on the girl one last time before he turned to leave with Dwayne. As they stepped away, the sound of police radios crackled behind them. They had done what they could. They had saved her. And now, it was up to the system to make sure she was never in danger again. John and Dwayne left the alley, their adrenaline finally beginning to settle as they walked down the quiet streets, the flashing police lights still illuminating the night behind them. But their part in this was done. Neither of them spoke for a few moments, both still processing everything that had happened. The weight of it all sat heavy on their shoulders. This wasn't just a random act of violence, not just one man preying on a helpless child. This was something larger. Something calculated. And they had only scratched the surface. Dwayne finally broke the silence. "You heard what that detective said. This wasn't just some guy. He was part of a network." John exhaled, rubbing a hand over his face. "Yeah. Which means there are more of them out there. More kids." Dwayne clenched his jaw, his hands balling into fists at his sides. "Makes me sick just thinking about it." John nodded, his expression dark. "And if we hadn't noticed her back in that park, if she hadn't made that signal." Dwayne didn't answer right away. He didn't need to. They both knew what would have happened. The girl would have disappeared, just another missing child that people might talk about for a few weeks, but then she would have become a statistic. John shook his head. "That can't happen again." Dwayne stopped walking, turning to face him fully. "What are you thinking?" John hesitated, then looked back toward the flashing police lights in the distance. This was just one case. One girl. And we barely caught it in time. How many others are out there right now, waiting for someone to notice them? Dwayne was quiet for a moment. Then he let out a slow breath. "You want to do something about it." John didn't even have to say it. He saw the same fire in Dwayne's eyes that was burning in his own. They had walked into this by accident, a morning jog, a glance at a girl in trouble. But now, they couldn't just walk away. Not when they knew what was out there. Dwayne nodded slowly. "All right, brother. I'm in." John gave a small smirk. "I figured you would be." Dwayne chuckled, shaking his head. "Well, someone's got to watch your back." They started walking again, this time with purpose. They weren't law enforcement. They weren't vigilantes. But they were two men who had seen something they couldn't ignore. And they weren't the type to look away. John exhaled, glancing up at the dark sky above. "Next time, we don't wait until it's almost too late." Dwayne nodded. "Next time, we start looking before they need to ask for help." They didn't know exactly where this would lead them. But one thing was certain. This wasn't over. Not yet. 2 weeks had passed since the night in the alley. Life in the city carried on as usual, people going about their days, unaware of how close they had been to something sinister lurking in the shadows. For John and Dwayne, however, that night had left a mark. They had returned to their regular routines, but neither of them could forget the fear in the girl's eyes, or the way she had gripped John's sleeve after realizing she was finally safe. They had done what they could. The police had taken over. The criminals were locked up. And the investigation into the trafficking network had expanded. But for them, it wasn't just about what had already happened. It was about what could still happen. That morning, they found themselves back in the same park, the place where it all started. The sun was shining. Families strolled along the paths. And the world seemed peaceful again. But they knew better now. They knew how easily something could be hidden in plain sight. They had learned to watch more carefully, to pay attention to the little details that most people missed. John adjusted his wrist wraps as they jogged along the familiar path. "Feel any different being back here?" Dwayne exhaled through his nose, nodding slightly. "Yeah. Feels like I see things differently now." John nodded in understanding. "Same." They ran in silence for a few more minutes, until John suddenly slowed down. Ahead, sitting on a bench near the path, was a familiar face. The little girl. She was different now. No longer frozen with fear. No longer sitting in tense silence. She looked up as they approached, and for the first time, she smiled. John and Dwayne exchanged a glance before walking over. The girl stood up, hesitating for a second before stepping closer. "Hi, Mr. John." "Hi, Mr. Dwayne." Her voice was small but steady. John crouched slightly so they were at eye level. "Hey, kid. How you doing?" She shrugged, but there was a lightness to her now. "Better." Dwayne smiled. "That's good to hear." She glanced down, kicking a pebble lightly before looking back up at them. "I wanted to say thank you. For helping me." John nodded, his voice soft. "You were really brave that day." She took a deep breath. "I was scared." Dwayne crouched beside John, his massive frame making her look even smaller. "Being scared doesn't mean you weren't brave." She thought about that for a moment, then nodded. John smiled. "So, you back to just being a normal kid again?" She grinned a little. "Yeah. My mom says I can take karate classes now." Dwayne chuckled. "That's a great idea. Next time, no one's messing with you." Her smile grew, and she stood a little straighter. John reached out and gently tapped her knuckles. "You take care of yourself, all right?" She nodded. "Okay." For a second, she hesitated. Then suddenly, she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around John in a quick hug. Then she did the same to Dwayne. She took a step back, her face bright with something that had been missing the last time they saw her. "Hope?" "Bye," she said before turning and running toward a woman standing nearby, waiting for her. John and Dwayne watched her go, a warmth settling in their chests. Dwayne let out a breath and smirked. "Guess that's one kid we don't have to worry about anymore." John nodded. "Yeah." They turned back to the path and started jogging again. The city was full of stories. Some were dark, hidden beneath the surface, waiting for someone to notice. But today, they had seen proof that sometimes, even in the worst moments, the right people could make a difference. And if they ever saw another silent cry for help, they knew exactly what they would do. They would run toward it. Sometimes, a single glance can change everything. John Cena and Dwayne Johnson didn't just witness something unusual, they acted when it mattered most. Because true heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes, they're just people who refuse to look away. Would you have done the same? Let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss more powerful stories like this.